And Alan, now specific to the awards that your grandfather could have received. We have a little group here that represents very nicely what would have given to him, and at least one that we know for sure actually was given to him. Why don't you tell us about what we see here?
Absolutely.
Starting with, of course, the one that you actually got from him.
Yes. Okay. So let's just point out the picture first. This is my grandfather, Aron, and you can see him in his uniform there as a private. The hat.
Yeah, that's ushanka. It's called ushanka hat, winter hat.
Yeah.
Adopted after the war with Finland. They first came up with this idea as a result of the war. But
he's got the private shoulder boards.
Yep.
And the
gymnasiorka.
And you notice that he's seated because of his injury. He was unable to stand at that point.
Recovering. Yeah.
But this is a photo that is taken actually at the hospital. And you can see the backdrop on this and the little portrait. So, you know, this is before he received his medal, so there's nothing here. And even his wound stripes that he didn't give him to this must have been a new uniform or something that they put him in for the photo and didn't.
Wouldn't bother. All those nice things came mostly after the war.
Exactly, which is typical for most militaries.
Especially enlisted men, there would be often a delay, a very significant one, sometimes years, but often months before the award could be given, actually physically delivered to the recipient after the award decree was already signed. It didn't necessarily mean that he would receive it the same day, of course not.
Absolutely.
And many times, oftentimes, not even within weeks.
I mean, we saw on the award document, it was written up in July and he didn't get the medal until November.
Yeah, that's a pretty typical case.
And that's how it is even in the West, you know. I mean, you could have a guy in Iraq and he wouldn't get a medal for a year later, depending on what it was.
But even after the commendation becomes an award decree, between the time of the award decree and the actual issuance of the medal, there may be another months or years. There were cases when they simply forgot, when any connection was lost with the recipient. He was no longer in the military.
Exactly.
His unit moved on to other places. Nobody had any idea where he was. Nobody was to go and try and look
to find
him. They had plenty of other stuff to worry about. So it sometimes took years, many years.
This is very common throughout all militaries. It's not just the USSR.
Like your grandfather.
Yeah, my American grandfather didn't even know he had a Bronze Star.
Exactly.
And it wasn't until recently that I was able to formally get his records amended. And, he would have died never knowing. But fortunately, he lived long enough to see it.
Yeah. That must have been a good feeling.
It was amazing. Yeah. And they even engraved his name on the medal. Yeah.
Wow. By the way, one other feature that I like to point out is this is such a quintessential enlisted man's uniform, down to even the belt. If you take a close look at the belt, this is a specifically enlisted man's belt, because you can see that there is only one prong. Officers would usually have two-prong belt, or a buckle rather, or they would have this fancy one with a cutout star that came up before the war. So what he's wearing is 100% quintessential, iconic infantryman's uniform.
Yeah.
And the fact that he is wearing no medals is also very typical.
I've seen that, yeah.
To popular belief, it was not easy to get medals, especially for enlisted men. Officers often received decorations for length of service. Enlisted men never did.
Wow.
And therefore, this is how Soviet infantrymen would look at the end of the war. Decorations would come later, if at all.
Ah, that's incredible. And so now the pants, are they black? What is the...
No, they would be the same color as the shirt and often mismatched. They would be given from existing stock. Everything was oftentimes wrong size, unless you knew a quartermaster real well.
So what are we looking at there? And what are the pants? Are they just...
We don't know what, because he's covered with some kind of blanket. These are not pants.
Yeah, there's a blanket.
He's covered because of his wound, probably.
Oh my goodness.
But what little we could see, you see there's a little bit of a gap here between the bottom of his shirt, bottom head. This is still his shirt.
Yeah.
And then you can see there's the same color looks like. Yeah, it's not colorized, but it's probably his pants, and the pants would be the same color.
Okay, and then just put a blanket around his legs.
Yeah,
to
just to keep
cover up
him comfortable.
Yeah.
No, maybe just to keep him warm because his wound was bothering him.
Okay.
Something like that. You see, he's wearing a hat, a winter hat, even though he's wearing a shirt.
And it's in
maybe,
summer.
maybe it's entirely possible that he was feverish or
Okay.
he wasn't, 100% well. Because normally you would expect a pilotka with this kind of attire,
Okay.
especially
that's
indoors
interesting.
and in the summer.
Fantastic.
So we can even, you can judge his state. Like he wasn't quite well yet.
There you go. That's an outstanding
You see
way
the blanket,
to
you
verify
see
it.
the fur cap.
Yeah.
It must be from that period of summer or maybe early fall of
Could be,
1945 when he was still in the hospital.
Outstanding. All right. Well, very good.
We're finding out something. Okay, so let's go on with the rest of what we have here. Rest of the medals. And where do we start? I would suggest that we talk about this badge because this is the only thing that you actually got from your grandfather.
Yes, so he was not known for keeping any of the awards or anything that he would have received either for Russia or Soviets, the Poles, or Israel. So this is actually the Guards badge, a Guardsman badge, and it indicated that you were actually a member of a Guards regiment. And, I had no idea why he had it. For a longest time, I mean, I knew what it was, but I didn't understand the significance. Why did he have it? And it wasn't until you found the document of his award that it all fit, so.
Awesome.
And we can see, he did not keep the nut that usually is there, but, this is an authentic World War II.
This is 100%, again, just like the photograph, Alan, this is as nice a World War II Guards badge as can be. And there is important difference between early Soviet Guards badges and the later ones. The early ones, not only construction is different, they are more massive. They have this nice, thicker enamel work. Not necessarily nice in terms of being fine, they're kind of crude. But different, noticeably different from the later ones. But the most important part that's very easy to remember, and it immediately tells you whether it's a wartime issue, immediate post-war issue, or something from the late 40s. You see that there is no fringe at the bottom of the
Exactly,
banner?
yes.
All the post-war badges, and by post-war I mean probably starting from around 47, I'm guessing 48, they have a fringe.
Yeah.
So if there is no fringe, sometimes there's what looks like an imitation of a twisted rope, like some kind of decoration, but certainly not a fringe. When you see something like this is a World War II Guard badge. And I must tell you, this is one of the best ones you're ever going to find.
Yeah, you think so, huh?
It's in gorgeous condition.
I love the white enameling there is just flawless on it, and you see that is generally cracked and broken away.
And my guess is he got it just after he got out of the hospital and just before he left the Soviet army for Poland and then eventually for Israel.
So maybe around the time he got the medal, they may, maybe just before that, or how did that work?
I would guess that he got it when he got out of the hospital, maybe returned to his unit, if he returned there briefly, or maybe upon leaving the hospital.
But would he have, is this a badge you keep with you the rest of your life?
Yes, you are eligible to keep
once you earn it, you keep it forever.
It's yours.
So how is so he would not have been issued it when he first showed up to the Guards Regiment?
No, but upon availability, he would have received it.
Okay. Yeah,
and who knows when the availability happened.
Right.
Maybe they only got the batch of badges to issue to their soldiers only in late 45. Or maybe he missed out earlier because he was out of the active duty.
Right.
He was convalescent. He was in the hospital. So when he got back, the first thing that happened, they said, "Oh, by the way, here's your Guards badge."
Okay.
And guess what? Then within another few months, he is out.
Yeah.
And that's why he never wore it.
And it just had no use.
And he had no use for a Soviet Guards
wearing
badge.
of it, yeah.
When he was fighting for Israel's independence.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty unique case and for that reason, it's in such a fantastic condition.
Yeah.
That he never wore it, and he got it just before getting out.
And so the badge coincided with the creation of the Guards units in 1943. Was it created at that same time? Or
No,
was it
Guards
after?
units actually appeared even earlier.
Oh, 42?
42, and they oftentimes used existing elite units. It's a popular opinion that Guards units were given the Guard status for their extraordinary performance in the war. But in fact, they actually created some Guards units from airborne units even before they got into battle.
I do see that,
they
yeah,
were
I have
Guards
seen
from
that.
the beginning. But yes, the badge came later, and I guarantee you that most of the Guards units members either did not have a badge or at least did not have the badge until very late in the war. Because judging by the photographs, officers probably would get it first. But enlisted men rarely wear a Guards badge in World War II photos.
Interesting.
So
That's
probably
very
possible, which
interesting.
is exactly what we have here, the same story.
Outstanding. That is so good.
So he definitely did not have, I can almost guarantee you that he did not have it before he got wounded this last time.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense.
And that's why condition is so good, because it wouldn't be in this shape.
If he was wearing it in
Wouldn't have been in
combat
this
for
shape.
certain, yeah.
He lost screw plate, unfortunately, somewhere along the lines. But everything else is just perfect. Look, all the finish, the gilt finish is still there,
Mm-hmm.
and the screw plate, the screw post is the right size. It's just excellent.
Thank you.
Very, very.
So this is an
very nice
indicator
piece.
that you're among the elite soldiers of the era. Is that what it
Sort of,
was
yeah,
supposed to be?
elite unit. Of course, they had raw conscripts in any unit.
Of course, yeah.
And of course, not everybody was a Rambo in that units. It wasn't considered Spetsnaz or special purpose forces.
Right.
So they didn't have necessarily all that fantastic training, but they were, more was expected.
But they were
typically.
expected really to combat the enemy, and even
Right. They
even
had-
down to the last man if necessary. If you read some of the stories, like how
they-
much they gut themselves on the enemy.
They had more elan. They had history of a unit. They had pride.
Yeah, yeah.
They had better weapons in many cases, better equipment, better pay, as a matter of fact. And by the way, Guards ranks meant more than normal ranks. In other words, if you were a Guards colonel, or Guards major, or Guards whatever,
So he would be a Guards private?
he would be a Guards private. It's a different rank than just
Okay.
a private,
Fantastic.
and better pay.
Does it stay with you when you leave the
As a
regiment?
matter of fact, yes, it does. As
Wow.
a matter of fact, yes, it does. And even upon retirement, they would be referred to as Guards. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes in paperwork.
So he's not just a private, he's a Guards
He's a
private.
Guards private.
That's
Yeah,
that I never knew that. I'm
different story.
happy to learn
Different
that.
story. Okay, so what else is here? We
Yeah,
have,
so we have
we have to mention that these are possibles.
Yes.
These are not the actual awards.
correct. They're not his. He never
But it's something he
kept them.
could have gotten
Yes.
if things were different, based on actual exploits and even on award recommendations.
Absolutely.
Like this recommendation from 1941. So maybe we should start with the Red Star then.
Sure, then. So, this would probably have been one of the two awards that he was given for either blowing up the Antonivka Bridge
Right.
or rewiring it under
Right,
fire,
right,
and
right.
then the spotting of the enemy paratroopers
Very
and
likely.
killing them, was it had to be one of those, right?
It could be this or even higher award of Order of the Red Banner. I've seen cases when those were issued, but Red Star is just very realistic. And what we have here,
Is a 1940.
it's a 1940 to 41. This one is probably even a little bit earlier, but he would have received the same kind of the same type of award, and it's type 4 variation 1, sub variation 1. There is a very evolved classification system because they changed the way they look slightly, very subtly, in terms of the mint mark, in terms of how the screw press looks, and some other details of the artwork. But he would have received the same, most likely, if he were awarded in 41 and actually got it in 41 or even early 42, it's likely that he would have received the same type. And it is characterized by this screw post base, which later Red Stars don't have, nice enamel work. Details are slightly different, very pointy arms of the star. Rounded
Yeah, I
as the
noticed
later
that. I
issues.
noticed that because normally they round them out later.
Later ones are rounded, more rounded. And they're not necessarily worse quality, they're just slightly different.
Sure.
But this
Different
is
design a
exactly
little
what
bit,
he
yeah.
would have received.
That is fantastic.
This is a silver screw plate. All the early ones had silver screw plates. Then what should we go to next?
So then we'll just, we'll talk the medal for Valor. This is the one that he actually was awarded, would have been awarded, the model.
Actually, he did get one. We know that for a fact.
We know for a fact
unfortunately
that he
do
got-
not have his.
Right, we don't
medal
have
for
his medal, but you're kind enough to use one of yours to show, and that this was the medal that he received on 2nd November 1945.
Right, and based on that, it would be with this type of suspension, not the early suspension.
Right, the blue and silver instead of just the red
Red rectangular, yes.
And this is what you got for killing at least 10 human beings.
Well, you could get actually even a higher award, such
Sure.
as an Order of Glory, but more realistic. And again, we know that he actually did get exact same thing.
Right.
The only difference would be serial number on the back, and that's the only thing that differs this particular medal from one that your grandfather actually got.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next
Beautiful. So then we have the battle or
medal for combat service.
Yeah, medal for battle merit, or how do you
It's
call
translated in many different ways. Traditional way to translate it that I'm using, it's not necessarily the closest to the actual Russian text. I would say combat service. If you translate it directly from the Russian, the closest would be for battle merit.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually a misnomer because a lot of these were awarded for other things than battle
I've
merit.
seen that, yeah.
And in particular for length of service to officers, starting from November of 1944.
Okay.
A lot of these were given to officers for simply 10 years of irreproachable, they called it irreproachable, uninterrupted service in the military. And I've seen some ridiculous cases when length of service awards, even very high ones, even up to the Order of Lenin, were given for essentially nothing.
Yeah.
Like the recommendation would literally say that this officer is not very disciplined.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the skills for position he currently occupies. It would be best if he is sent for additional training or demoted. Nevertheless, because of his 25 years of service, I thereby recommend him for the Order of Lenin.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So your grandfather's case is absolutely different.
Yeah.
So this would have to be earned.
I think this
the
was
hard way.
Yeah. Then they had a version of this in 1941 that was not the yellow and silver.
But yes, it was on a small rectangular red
Yes.
suspension,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
someday maybe we'll have an episode we'll cover
Sure.
variations of combat service medal. But yes, in a nutshell, yes, it was a different look. But the medal itself remained pretty much the same.
So probably he could have earned both of these medals for his actions when the commander was writing up the commendations.
Right.
Would it seem
It's
within the
totally
ballpark?
plausible. And one other thing that's entirely plausible is that he could have been awarded in 41 or recommended in 41. Even an award decree could have come up in 1941, and he wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And nobody would tell him.
Yeah.
And his current unit wouldn't be aware of that.
Exactly, yes.
And it would take 5 or 6 years until he would receive the medal. And in that case, guess what? Of course, he would receive the new type of medal.
Yeah,
So he would receive something like this.
exactly.
So it's equally likely, as a matter of fact.
Fantastic. This is the Defense of Kiev medal, which didn't come out until the 60s, correct?
That's correct. That was Khrushchev's idea because Khrushchev was
in
one of
charge
the people
guys there.
in charge of the defense. And of course, defense failed miserably, and this whole calamity was never advertised very much and never made much of a story in the whole lore of
World War
Second
II, yeah.
Second World War,
The Great Patriotic War for them.
War. But in the 60s, to please the current leader, in the early 60s, he was still there. He would be dismissed very soon.
Yeah.
but in the coup. But they didn't know, and they wanted to please him, and that was one of the ways to please him. Medal for the defense. So your grandfather couldn't have received it because he was no longer
Exactly,
a Soviet citizen.
and he never
And he was actually
asked for it.
He was
either.
actually
in Israel
a
at that point.
citizen of a hostile country. You know that you could not, if you were leaving for Israel, even in as late as the 80s, if your visa said Israel, or your destination was Israel, they would strip you of your Soviet citizenship.
Oh, really?
You could not be a Soviet citizen heading to Israel because Israel was an enemy country, plain and simple.
And they could
you could
take
go
your
to the
citizenship away?
And they did mine.
Whoa.
I was ostensibly, that wasn't my plan, but I was ostensibly living for Israel. And they took my citizenship. So I was a person without nationality when I was in Italy waiting for my visa.
So that's amazing.
So, yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. My great uncle was in Italy also before he went to the Cyprus camp, when he got out of the Soviet army. I know he was infantry, that's all I know. But I know he was in Italy there, and then Cyprus, and then Israel. Yeah. It's amazing.
So
one question I had about this. You notice that there's the red stripe and the blue stripe, and sometimes the blue stripe, I see it on the left, but is it correct? It's supposed to be on the right.
It's supposed to be this way.
On the right, okay, yeah. That's a story. Like, what is the significance? Do you know what because the Stalingrad medal has the
red stripe, and it's a narrower red stripe.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I wish I knew. But generally speaking, defense medals have this green theme to most of the ribbons. If you remember how they look, Stalingrad, Leningrad, all they have this green background, which may symbolize the uniform of a Red Army soldier. Because, you know, Soviet uniform are khaki, or in Russian it's all referred to as green. So it's different shape, different shade of green.
Right, got it.
So you could.
That's interesting.
You could probably make a case that's that. Red streak of blood, I suppose, that was shed for the motherland.
Maybe that represents the Danube?
Dnieper, possibly, very possibly. It never occurred to me, but yes, I bet you're right.
Maybe something like that. Yeah. And, you know, because it was on the, on the right side, you think of it like that. And did Khrushchev actually help design this? I know Stalin, you said Stalin would have.
I don't know if Khrushchev was. Khrushchev, I think, was probably more aloof and didn't care as much. But who knows? I know that he actually curtailed to a great degree the practice of awarding medals en masse, and actually changed this system of awarding medals for length of service. It was during his reign that stopped. And he actually demanded austerity from everybody, including going as far as reducing the number of decorations. So many of the party officials were actually offended, sort of quietly, when they suddenly received the medals for valiant labor or distinguished labor, because they expected higher awards, but not during Khrushchev times.
Interesting. That's because I mean, you look at characters like Brezhnev, and
that changed, of course, dramatically.
So he must have kind of gone back to that old way.
Of course, he wanted to please everybody.
Yeah, and he needed more and more Soviet heroes.
So he decided to use the largesse. Well, he was a great medal collector himself.
Yeah.
So that came first, and then secondly, he wanted to please veterans. He wanted to be kind of grandfatherly or fatherly to everybody. Many people who are still alive, who were adults during his reign, still remember this time in Soviet history as a very comfortable time, as a good time, because for a number of reasons, the Soviet Union was actually benefiting from all the mineral resources. That
the oil prices had gone up as well.
And of course, I was about to say, oil prices.
Yeah.
So they were exporting oil, exporting weapons too, exporting diamonds that they had found in Siberia. That wasn't the case before. And all this insanity of Khrushchev attempts to somehow liberalize Soviet economy, they realized it's not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So all those shocks were over, and the money was there, and they were spending part of it on medals.
Yeah, very, very interesting how the medals are such a priority for the people, for the leaders. It's so integrated in mass into the culture. Unlike here in the West, the soldiers have them and all, but you would never see civilians walking around with medals, and the design. Most civilians are totally oblivious to what the medals.
It's propaganda. It's a regime based on lies, as socialism always is. And to propagate these lines and to support itself, it needs to brainwash people.
It's cheaper to give you a medal than to give you a raise.
Exactly. Well, now, that being said, with medals came various benefits, especially if it was an important medal.
Sure, yeah.
Like medal for Valor, for example, would actually give you a pension.
Really?
Yeah, I think about 10 rubles a month, which wasn't a small sum for a poor worker somewhere. And that continued until 47. They canceled it after that.
Okay.
So your grandfather was eligible for 10 ruble payments monthly. Were it not for the case that he defected to the enemy country.
That's
all right.
funny.
So what's next?
Now we have a World War II victory medal.
Yes, and
using the St. George Cross.
Exactly.
And it's supposed to be fire and smoke. Is that the
yes, fire for and smoke.
Yeah, almost like George R.R. Martin with his Ice and Fire novels.
They presaged it.
Fire and smoke. Yeah. So you got Comrade Stalin, Tovarishi Stalin, and what does it say here on the top and the
Our
bottom?
cause was right, thus we won.
Yeah.
Oh, so we won without saying so much, but that's what it means, really.
Well, that's
our cause was just, you could say. Our cause was just, we won. And on the back, for victory over Germany, let's flip it and look at the back, for victory over Germany right here, and then in the Great Patriotic War of 1941, 1945. Now, notice it's not for victory in World War II. Because Soviets always, well, part of the reason was that whose side were they in World War II? Think about it. 39, 40, they were active allied. Not allied necessarily, but
neutral and helpful.
They were more than neutral.
Well, they gave the
they were helping in a great way.
Resources and stuff.
Right. In more ways than one. And then they attacked Finland, so So they attacked Poland, they attacked a number of places.
I mean, even Churchill said, look, if the devil were against Hitler, I'd say something good about him as well, His quote was a little bit different, but that was the gist.
If Hitler decided to invade hell I would at least
have
made a favorable speech towards Hitler in the Commons.
To the devil. To the devil.
To the devil in the Commons. Yes,
that's how it goes. So good.
So that's the one that he probably had, actually. It's likely that he could...
Did it come out in 1945?
The medal came up in 45, and this version of it that I have here is variation, so-called variation 1. It has separate eyelet. And if he did get it 45 or 46, he would have had this particular version. Because later they have this they have solid construction. In other words, the medal and its eyelet was struck as one piece.
Yeah.
It's variation 2. It can still be fairly early. 47 probably is when they, or possibly even late 46, we don't know exactly when they started to appear, but the early ones were variation 1. And it means, we don't know if he actually did receive it or not. He could have. In November 45, many people did. Or early 46, depending on when he left his unit and headed for Israel. Good. But it's entirely possible. And last one.
And this is the liberation of Warsaw, which is the battle that he was able to be awarded for the Medal of Valor.
Right.
And
that would come automatically, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know if he actually received the medal.
Probably not.
He was eligible, but it's possible he could have gotten it in 46 or so, or early 46. Or it could be later if he was still around, if he was still there in the Soviet Union. And even as late as 1960s, 70s, 80s, they continued awarding those catch-up awards that went to veterans who, for some reason, didn't receive them earlier. So, what we have here is this kind of veterans award. They call it Voenkomat. Voenkomat means military commissariat. And those were usually the ones who issued medals to civilians who were war veterans. And it's the military commissariat version.
Sure. So what does it say here again?
For the liberation, of course.
That's it?
Exactly, yeah.
And then on the back...
like all of them, they have the date of liberation. 17 January is when
1945.
Warsaw was taken. There was no resistance. The Germans
Yeah.
simply abandoned the
And
city.
the city was
It was
destroyed.
completely destroyed. It was a ghost town.
Yeah.
Nobody lived there.
But they still had the 1st Polish Division do a march through
Kościuszka division, yeah.
right through the march
Right,
of
yeah.
the city.
No,
and there's nobody there.
It was absolutely horrible. Yeah. And Russia, Soviets allowed this to happen.
Yeah,
No hiding this.
very beautiful. And then we have a couple of these wound stripes. So 2 yellows, recognizing heavy
Serious
wounds.
wound.
So you need surgery, something. So the surgery for the left
his
hand,
hand
surgery
wound.
for the right thigh, and then a red stripe, which again he
When
earned
he took
for these.
shrapnel.
Yeah, this was for the trench combat that he had in 15 January of 45. Same event that he got this medal for. He was wounded in the hand-to-hand combat there, so he didn't need surgery on that one, and it didn't remove him from the service like these other two had the effect on him.
Right.
And then the last one that we have here is.
I see it's the Jubilee version of the Order of the Patriotic War.
Yes, 1985. And
Okay, and
so
this is something that he would have received if he was still in the Soviet Union.
still in the Soviet
1985.
Union, he had they had the first class. This is the first class with the gold gilt around it, and they had the second class. And according to the regulations, if you were awarded the Medal of Valor or Order of
Or any high
Glory or something,
decoration.
yeah, you automatically were eligible for the first class of the
True.
1985.
And it didn't matter if you already had that award, it could be awarded repeatedly.
Again, yeah.
Some people earned Order of Patriotic War numerous times.
Yeah.
It's not very uncommon to see 3 of them to the same person, or 2 of them at least. That would be his by
So it's
right.
basically like a badge that says you were in the war.
True, and they kind of cheapened it by doing this
Yeah.
because initially Order of Patriotic War was pretty hard to earn.
Yes.
There was a whole list of requirements.
Sure.
They didn't follow this entirely. Many were given to political officers, but some, quite a number of them, were given for real exploits. And it was hard to earn. Then they decided 30 years later to celebrate the victory, to award veterans just so they feel good. And this was part of Brezhnev's program of making party
Are we
cadres.
talking about this?
Yeah.
Okay, so 1985.
1985.
So 40 years later.
40 years, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
40 years later.
40
But Brezhnev was, I thought
85,
Andropov had.
it was Andropov
come in.
already took over, but they continued with the same way.
Sure. Yeah.
So Brezhnev died in 1982.
Yeah. And then
So,
Andropov
but
followed him
Andropov,
shortly.
yeah,
There he is.
85
Was
wait a minute,
Gorbachev.
Gorbachev was already on.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, he didn't turn this train right away.
Right.
It's later, in the late 80s, when they really curtailed
Yeah.
everything, but they were running out of money.
So you can really see where Khrushchev tried to rein it in and Brezhnev opened up the floodgates again.
Exactly,
And
and
then-
those floodgates did close immediately.
Yeah.
So even during the Gorbachev time, and we were just discussing it in our episode on the Order of Honor, there were plans, these grandiose plans of new decorations, and they came up with this Order of Honor that would have to be completely different from the old Order of Badger one that they replaced. And it all fizzled essentially because they were so out of money and really even intentions, like really power to do anything. It was really the twilight of the Soviet era, that they simply took the existing stock of old orders that were not yet issued, tweaked them a little bit, made a change in the name, removed a part of the decoration, put a plaque on top of it, and called it a new order. So instead of coming up with something new that would be expensive and laborious, they cut corner and did this, which is, you can laugh, but this
No,
is
it makes sense.
how the Soviet
Yeah.
system was actually nearing collapse.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore, we're finally realizing that all those gestures, like issuing millions of orders made of sterling silver for no other reason than to please veterans, that was over.
Yeah.
That was finally over.
That's
But this was part of the last, 1985 was the last grandiose celebration of victory anniversary, and many veterans were still alive. So millions received this order of the Patriotic War. Not so many of the first class were issued, just over 1 million, which is small compared to the number of second classes, which goes in 7 or 8
Yeah.
millions.
Did you have another award that was that you were mentioning about how the Soviets had intended to proceed further, but the award then, trying to give a highlight of what their intentions were based on creating that.
There are sketches of it. I don't have them now, but I can show you how the new thing looked, and it's funny. And we already covered this, but this is this award that I was talking about, Order of Honor, and it looks exactly like the old Order of Badge of Honor, with the only exception is that the old one said Badge of Honor here, and this one has this hammer and sickle because they changed the name first and then decided to redesign, and then by the time they got to redesigning, all those plans were shelved pretty much, but they couldn't go back because they already announced that there's a new order. So what they did is they took existing stock and simply added this little part here that covered the name. Now, what's funny also is for collectors, it's important to know that there are many fakes of them, and this happens to be a fake.
Okay.
So what they do is they take a Badge of Honor with the very high serial number, and the numbers overlap because some had already been issued by that time as in the old form. So they take one that's readily available on the market. They're very inexpensive because million and a half or so were issued, and then they simply drill holes. They remove the name, just like what the mint did. So they repeat the
process.
They follow in the footsteps of Soviet mint, except for quality is not there.
Right.
Mint still held its high quality. They had the machinery, they had skilled labor to do it right. Fakers don't. So you have this inconsistencies there. The rivets don't look right. They're misshapen and all that jazz. And of course, the part itself, the main part itself, when you take a close look, close comparison with the original, you will notice the difference. But this is the last Soviet decoration.
Okay.
Just like we looked at the last Imperial Russian medal in our previous episode, this is the last Soviet one.
Fantastic. Well, that is so interesting how it all connects to each other and the logic that these people are trying to live by, but they keep stumbling over themselves and they realize things get in the way.
People never learn and never willing to learn from history.
And I'll show you another photograph here, and this is when he was in
Israel,
in the Israeli military, and you can see he's wearing a British
style
uniform that was
leftover
spares, right, because of the British Palestine, right? And my grandmother, and she is
great.
She is the 1% of survivors from the Lublin population there that used to be there. Only 200 or so Lublin Jews out of 20,000 survived. So
what a story.
And then I have a phenomenal photo here. If we can make a little bit of room here with the awards. And you'll see where they finally meet each other.
Your grandfathers.
Both of my grandfathers, and he was...
This is the American grandfather?
Yes, this is my American grandfather. He was a tech corporal in the 335th Infantry Regiment, and then with the 84th Infantry Division, and then later the 78th Infantry and their band. So that's when, and then here he is older.
Look at the happy faces.
Yeah.
This is actually this is photograph from the first time.
This is the first time they met each other. Knowingly met each other, I should say, right?
Yeah, but they might have met each other.
They could have. I really believe that there's this, because the Russians would do parades through the Brandenburg
so they saw,
and these guys played the music.
They saw each other.
Yeah, so there's a
what's in store for them.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
And now you can even see like the kind of height difference, that happened, but it's
malnutrition,
Yeah, it is, but it's incredible that he was such a tough man. Like, the bones, and I tell you a little story before, but he could break the handles of tools and stuff, the wooden handles, and just break them by twisting them. He was such a powerful man, and so both of them had incredible frontline experiences in the most vicious war ever fought, and lived to tell about it. And
what an amazing story.
And I absorbed every detail I could get.
Good for you.
You know, just could never let it go. And fortunately, I got to see him one more time before, when I left the army. I was able to travel to Israel and meet with him and with my father, and just as soldiers now, a room of just 3 soldiers talking to each other. And that's when he really started to reveal a lot of other details about things that he just held in reserve, you know. And last photo I have, this is a photo of him on a mortar, you know, but this is after the Battle of Latrun.
So they're just posing here.
Yeah, so they're just posing.
That's still great.
Yeah, and they have groups of them in other photos that I could not get out of the binder.
So they're among the few, I mean, not few, but among not so many survivors.
But I want to point out, you see they're wearing a black berets, right? And when I was in the army my last year, we switched to black berets as the uniform. And as a child, I always said, "Oh, that looks so cool to have a beret and as a soldier." And then, you know, that transition occurred for the U.S. Army in 2001. So, but you know, the comrades they have, and you know, this is. There are a couple handful of photos, but my family literally never kept or interested or cared, you know, to keep their relics beyond, you know, just the Guards badge and, you know, a handful of medals that my American grandfather had, but then they were stolen, so I had them replaced, and that's when I found out that he should have had a Bronze Star. So if you're a military genealogist, I know how sophisticated and complex it is. Definitely
no, that's quite a work.
A chase, you know?
Quite a work. But it's worth it. Look at this stories you dug up.
Absolutely. And it enriches everybody, you know, when they know their family history. You know, even my siblings who know nothing about the military, it's just they now have information that was non-existent before that. And it has a great effect for everyone.
Thank you so much for putting it all together for us, and
my privilege
for this fantastic presentation and this unbelievable war stories.
Absolutely, and I'm so happy to share it, and especially for someone like you who helped me kick this whole thing off.
No,
you know,
my role was very very small in this whole thing,
but enough to get it going. That's what matters.
Thank you, Aron.
So
thank you so much. It was a privilege and pleasure to have you over in our office, and thanks again for everything you've done.
Absolutely, loved it.